Roots, New Art on Stage.
Well, welcome everybody to the 17th edition of the Art of Assembly. Today with the title Body Next to Body, Gathering Masses in Sport Events, which is a bit unusual topic within the nomadic series of lectures and talks that we have been doing for the last 1.5 years, where we try to investigate the potential of gatherings in art, activism and politics. But it's a rather obvious topic in regard to the space we're in tonight, the Olympiapark in Munich, but about this a bit more in a moment. Our guests tonight are Z. Blace, Caitlin Davis-Fisher and Michael Gabriel. I'm very happy you made it here, and I will introduce you all a bit more in depth later on. We are in a space, well, we are next to a space designed by Raumlabor Berlin and Raoul Walch, who, together with Feline Rinnert, designed the banners and logos for the Art of Assembly. So it's a good opportunity also to thank you, Raoul, even though you are not here just in this moment again, to almost thank you in person for that. This edition is happening in the frame of Soft Democracies, a project by Raumlabor Berlin as part of the 50th anniversary of the 1972 Munich Olympics, organized by the Cultural Department of the City of Munich. So Raumlabor was, in this case in person of Benjamin Förster-Baldoinius, already a guest of the Art of Assembly, so it's very nice to be today guest of Raumlabor in return. Thanks so much for this invitation. And this space is in the middle of a much bigger space, obviously, designed by architect Günther Benisch, by Frei Otto, who designed the iconic net tent structure in the back here, and the iconic, just as iconic, visual identity by Otto Eicher. It was inaugurated 50 years ago in order to host the Olympic Games. And within this architecture, I would say, one can still feel the hope or almost desperate belief in an open society, in democracy, in peace, that was informing these architects just 27 years after the dawn of the Third Reich. From today's point of view, this is very touching and very, very far, I would say, all this optimism behind it. And in fact, a different reality broke, as we know, into this probably also very West German dream already days later after it was opened. So today, in this edition of the Art of Assembly, we want to look at assemblies in sports more generally, the assemblies of audiences, the energy of body next to body, of thousands of bodies next to thousands of bodies, the excitement of the game, winning, losing, bursts of emotion, shouting, singing, yelling, joy and anger, sometimes on the verge of violence. But also that elite sports bring together masses of people across nations. They are gathering with an immense personal importance for many. And at the same time, they are highly politicized and economized billion-dollar businesses, streamlined for maximum profits on and sometimes beyond the borders of legality. And of course, there's maybe also the question that we can talk about, are these really assemblies or just masses? Not only Elias Canetti saw in these masses the opposite of the democratic citizen. So he described the stadium explicitly outside of the city of the polis as a place where all the association, rules and habits of the cities were left behind. But other thinkers have pointed out that this mass does not actually follow a leader, that this mass doesn't take order. So that this is a mass also where the individuum experiences society. So maybe this discrepancy or these opposite views is something we can also talk today about. And maybe it is important in this context not to forget that, for example, the ultra football fans have played an important role in the Arab Spring, mainly in Egypt during the revolution. And for our context, as we usually talk about assemblies also in the relationship to the arts, there's also the big fascination of so many artists, writers, theater makers, intellectuals with sport that is important to remember. So young Bertolt Brecht famously demanded that one should come to theaters like to sport events, with the same enjoyment, expectation, eagerness, but also with the knowledge of the rules, the expertise that the audience in a sport event has, and that he thought, maybe rightfully, a theater audience very often doesn't have in the same way, and is not as much understanding the rules of the game being played, which is something that actually relates very much to to what we were talking about in the past in terms of assemblies in art. But besides this, I guess there are more theater metaphors in football, talking about drama, tragedies, final acts, etc., than there are football metaphors in art. Anyway, tonight, artist and queer activist Z. Blace looks at how sport events could become owned by the community, counter-nationalist, counter-normative, gender-just, and sex-positive emancipatory experiences. And Caitlin Davis Fisher, a former professional football athlete, works as movement researcher now, artist and activist on gender, labor, and the body, and will talk about this and also community organizing in, with, and through football. But we begin with the expert in fan culture and social worker Michael Gabriel, who gives an insight into the cultural practices of the ultras, claiming streets and stadiums with elaborated choreographies and the self-confidence of the masses. As an active football player, Michael Gabriel became German champion with Eintracht Frankfurt in the B and A youth and played with the second team of Eintracht for 7 years in the then third highest German division. He took part in the 1983 World Junior Championship in Mexico with the Austrian U20 national team, and after completing his studies in sports science, his professional career led him into social work with young soccer fans. From 1992 to 1996, he worked for the Frankfurt Fan Project with the fans of Eintracht Frankfurt. In 1996, he moved to the Fan Project Coordination Office, KOS, where he had been director since 2006. The KOS currently oversees 71 fan projects in Germany, which work with younger soccer fans of the respective clubs based on the so-called national concept Sport and Safety. The KOS has also been responsible for fan support for traveling soccer fans from Germany since 1996. And during the 2006 World Cup in Germany, it was responsible for fan support in all 12 host cities. So I'm very happy you are here and would invite you to take the floor first.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for having me here. As I'm not regularly speaking in English or giving lectures in English, I do have a little help on my side, my phone, where I hope I can profit from. What I want to try is to give a little insight in the ultra fan culture, where it comes from, where it came from, what is what moves the ultras, what is important for them, and how is their relationship to the authorities in football and in society, and how they act in public spaces. You can see the stadia as a more or less public space, besides the fact that it is privately owned, or the streets of the city. First, I want to start with a little bit historic development. Specific areas in stadia where young fans gather together, disconnect from the adults. They are known from the 70s in Germany. They are known from the 70s in Germany. And at that time, German fans hugely looked to English football, to the home of football and to the home of football fan culture. And though they adopted the accessoires and the chants and the singing from English fan culture. And so German fan culture was highly influenced by the English style of support. This is a very, very important point, and that is the support follows what's happening on the pitch. This has changed with the ultras. I will come to that later. After the disaster of Hillsborough in Sheffield, when 97 supporters from Liverpool died, and it had nothing to do with violence. It was clear organizational failure and police failure. In England, the stadia were rebuilt to all-seater stadia. The standing areas were abandoned, And that led to, what's the name? I will check the name, what it is. Sanitized, the English art, the English way to support. And young football fans in Germany who, and it has influenced the German support as well. And young fans who at that time came to the stadia, they looked to Italy, where since the 80s, the ultras were the most important fan culture, and they used big flags, they used choreographies, they used Bengal flares, and this is different to English support. In England, this was unthinkable because this refused the view to the pitch, and as it was more active, more vital, the young German fans, they sought by themselves to become ultras, and so they established the ultras in German stadia. Different to former fan cultures in Germany as well is that they see themselves as ultras 24/7, whereas in former times you were a football fan only on match day, not in midweek. But ultras they see themselves a little bit like an ideology to perform their style 24/7 and their way of how they see life. Their support is not connected with the match anymore. Sometimes it is, of course, but they want to support the team 90 minutes during the whole of the match. It is orchestrated by a lead singer. There's only one or two occasions in German football, in German ultra scenes, where we had female lead singers. It's only men who are coordinating the support. They turn the back to the pitch, looking at the masses, and they are directing the masses with the aim of 90 minutes full support. Another difference to former fan cultures is that there is a connection with other youth cultures, like the graffiti scene. When you walk through cities with open eyes, in every big city you will see the tags and the pictures from ultras, and with the hip hop scene as well. There's quite of intercultural exchange, so one can say. And ultra is a global phenomenon. It's from North America over South America. South America much bigger than in North America, as it is a more football country than it is North America. Over North Africa, Florian already mentioned the part of the ultras when the Arab Revolution went on, and to Asia, Japan, Indonesia. You find the ultra culture and the special kind of support there. Against commercialization in an extremely commercialized area of sport or in an entertainment industry, definitely a paradox. On the one hand, the choreographies of the ultras, the atmosphere they are creating, has become an important factor for the marketing of football in Germany. On the other hand, the ultras are absolutely against commercialization in sport, absolutely opponent to them. And it's when they are doing a choreography, they are doing it 100% independently. Everything is from the first minute until what you see in the stadium is independently done by the ultras, and exclusively financed by the ultras. They see it as a gift to the club. Ultras engage for fan-friendly surroundings for football, or for fan-friendly conditions in stadia. For those who are active in the stadia at home matches or away matches. And this is, when you think of marketing, you have another, you can't say set of supporters, but the DFL, the institution who's organizing the football, the Bundesliga in Germany, they have the TV consumer in mind. And when they sell the TV marketing rights, which is putting a lot of money in German football, they don't think necessarily of those who are in the stadia. And this was, over the years, a field of controversy, and the protests from the ultras and from the larger fan scene against, for instance, Monday night games, they are really legend. They fought for more than 20 years to get rid of the Monday night games because they are absolutely unfriendly to those who have to work. Yeah, they have to take at least one day off from work to go to a away game or even to go to a home match. And this fight was 2 years ago. It was at the end successful because in Germany you don't see Monday night football games anymore. At the same time, the ultras have great interest in participation. They want to have a say in how the clubs are run. So they are fighting for the 50+1 rule, which this I'm going to read, which is intended to guarantee the democratically organized member-led football clubs the majority of votes, and to prevent a takeover by investors, which has recently happened, for instance, in Newcastle, where a Saudi Arab state fund bought the traditional football club of Newcastle United. For the stream, I forgot the pictures. This is for those behind the and on the screens, at the screens. This is a choreography at Eintracht Frankfurt. These are pictures from a demonstration. This is a protest against the Anstoßzeiten, the Monday night games. Yeah, and now ultras in public space. Not only the stadia. Ultras take the streets with big confidence, like selbstverständlich. They so-called fan marches, in which several thousand people move through cities to the stadiums, are not registered. It means they're not going to the police or to the city council to ask for, can we go there? No, they go there, and they expect that the officials will cooperate to make that a friendly experience. And they are doing that because of experience. They learned, they are so good, so well organized, and they can become quite powerful on the streets. So they with that experience, they claim the streets for these fan marches with high confidence. The stadium, and now the stadium, let me talk first about the stadium. The stadium is used by the ultras for spreading political messages with large banners. The content can be on two fields. Can be, as I already mentioned before, can be the interference in conflicts or in topics which relates the football, the sport, the organization of the sport, but it also can address socio-political conflicts. Like, as one can imagine, if you are seen by police as a potential problematic group, you have regularly contact with police, not a friendly contact from both sides not a friendly contact, and so a lot of topics around how police is treating football fans are obvious, and so they use the stadium to protest against police violence, or to demand the fantastic German word Kennzeichnungspflicht, means that every police officer must be identifiable when on duty, which is in Germany, which is not the case in Germany. The other field on a socio-political level is racism and other forms of discrimination. It should be noted that with the advent of the ultras, racism, the situation regarding racism and other forms of discrimination has improved significantly in the last 20 years. One cannot measure that, but as I'm like in that kind of work for more than 25 years now, the number of people, of young people and not so young people, who are engaging for diversity in fan culture, for diversity in society, has absolutely increased, and it has influenced the politics of the clubs as well. The fans were first, the clubs came after that, and this has improved the situation very well. The hegemony of the right in German football, which was there still in the 90s, this has clearly changed the other way around, and this is quite interestingly different to society, where the right claimed more and more space, public space, political space. And the last aspect I would like to talk about is are the gender requirements in the football fan culture of the ultra. Of course, the ultra scene is very male orientated. Although more and more women are coming to football matches, and families are coming to football matches. The stadia in Germany, they are full. The Auslastung, I don't know the English word for that. 90% of the capacity in average is reached when football in Germany is happening. It has the highest percentage in world football. And it's because families and women are coming to the stadia. But men are still the majority. I would guess 70% are male, and the rest are the women and children. When you look at the ultras, it's worse. At least 10%, I would guess, are female, and the closer you get to the center of power, the so-called directivo, the less women you will find there. Both men and women, of course, are subject to some gender requirements. For men, it's presence, it's heterosexuality, toughness, assertiveness, leadership. Meeting with that requirement, these requirements, comes at a variety of costs. Emotional closeness, empathy, tenderness being soft and skillful is not welcomed. You get loose of that, or you will not develop it in your personality. Stress, loneliness, and emotional limitations are on the side of the costs. When you look at women in fan culture or in the ultra culture, they find, on the one hand, a field of self-assurance and self-efficacy. It might surprise someone, but in that male-dominated area, women can test own behavior, which they cannot do in other fields, like swearing, being aggressive, shouting at other, and this. From interviews, we know that this is somehow an open space where women grow or can grow. But sorry. But women are also subject to certain gender requirements, but their presence in the scene is much more ambiguous and endangered compared to men. They need to show presence, but not too much. They have to take on tasks, but the path to leadership tasks is blocked, and they should correspond to certain male attractiveness ideas, but not too much. To cope with all this takes a lot of strength. For this reason, women leave their groups relatively frequently. You hardly find women as long in the ultra scenes as you find the men in there. And with that, I will close. Thanks a lot for listening, and I will hand over to Florian.
Thank you very much. We are right in the middle of the topics now, and just so you know, I have to rearrange myself here. Here we are, and we continue with Sie Blace. I guess in many ways connecting to the last, also to what you said last about certain gender requirements in fan culture and in sport very often. Sie Blace is consistently working in between fields of contemporary culture and arts, digital technology and media, community, sports and activism, by cross-pollinating queer commoning perspectives and embodied experiences with thinking and doing methods across different networks and contexts. Blace is active in Croatia's new media culture scene since 1996 as web designer, artist and journalist, soon as organizer, researcher and curator within several media culture-focused NGOs, including Multimedia Institute, as founding executive and coordinator curator in Net Culture Club Mama in Zagreb. And in 2005, Željko instigated queer sport by organizing and instigating sport and recreation activities, community and cultural events, as well as presented and published on LGBTQ plus queer realities across art/culture and social/political access of sport in collaborative projects as queer sport kicker tables for diversity, but also queering sport sessions at Van Abbe Museum and many other places. And now I shorten it a little bit and not mention them all. Together with Kathleen Fischer, Blace has co-founded Connective CC Sport, which we will hear about, and you led EU-wide grassroots research project Beyond Binaries, examining the spectrum of masculinity, femininity, hetero-homonormativity in aquatic sports and dance in 2018 to 2019. And now I stop and hand over the microphone to you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much. I had no idea this was going to be read in full length, in almost full length. Anyway, for those who have mobile phones with internet access, you can also see the presentation on your mobile phones. If you write Linktree and dot is just before double E, so linktr.ee/cc sport, and then the first link is the presentation. If you enjoy visuals, yeah. I was just going to show few visuals first before my presentation that relates to this fan culture, because Caitlin and me inside of the CC Sport Connective curated an exhibition in 2016 in Berlin that included one really nice work produced in Munich in 2006. And it was focused on fans and fans culture, and the artist Jean-Ulrich Desert was doing a community project where he kind of decolored all of the fan costumes into being plain white, and then invited museum visitors to dress up in this like ultra radical fan costumes, but because they're all bleached out to white, they all looked the same and oddly similar and as assembly. Yeah, it also brings a little bit spookiness because they have mass covers before pandemic for anonymity in the ultra cultures. Yeah, I'm going to talk about sport as a field. I'm not going to talk about specific sport discipline like football is. So my references will be mostly from intersections of what we know as mainstream sports, arts, and work in public sphere, mostly community practices, but also that can be referred to as post-sport, post-arts, and post-public sphere these days. I will try to speak in a queer, non-representative way. I have no idea if this will work, usually fails at some point. But to locate in time, space, and culture at this amazing Olympic venue, I'll try to bring some timelines that are not so familiar to people who are inside of the sport field and who maybe have missed these queer niches. I will refer to the context of arts, at least for me as someone coming from arts. This was very productive kind of complexity of queerness, arts, and sport. There is one mainstream quote I will use from Billie Jean King, if you know the famous tennis player who won Bobby Riggs in a Battle of Sexes, the famous tennis match in between former male champion and running female champion. When she said sport is a laboratory for values, including the value of diversity. I think this is super amazing that she said, as someone who did have mainstream success and who didn't do experimental practices like some of us, and who still believes that sport can be used as a place for experimentation and testing and both learning and kind of producing new potentials in a society, or creating conditions for creating, having potential to create new phenomena in society. So in between sports, politics, and arts, what is specific my approach is that I look into sex and gender, not necessarily exclusively into direction related to identity politics, but into different types of feminist and queer practices. I'm practitioner. I don't refer to much queer theory or to sport theory, to sport science. I'm interested in historic and cultural context and kind of what practitioners can bring into this research and discourse development. I'm also interested in queer sport events, not as a subgenre of mainstream sport that is made for minorities, and it's kind of island or a bubble of like a safe space, but exceptional supramodels that anyone can learn from regardless of their sexuality or gender expression. Now I'm showing the slide of Black Power salute, which is historically probably the most famous political gesture that anyone relates to in Olympics. Of course, it was from 1968 with such tensions in societies all over the world, and it was, of course, important emancipatory moment for these sprinters, all three, including Peter Norman, who was an ally who actually borrowed gloves to John Carlos and Tommy Smith to do this famous Black Power salute. What is a little bit less known is that this moment also inspired the phenomenon I will be describing that is called the Gay Olympic Games. So back at the Mexico Olympics, the US national team of athletics included Tom Mandel, who at the time was decathlete. He was high-level competitor. He was 6th at the Olympics. He broke his own 6 records in 10 disciplines, but some people were even better. And because he was explicitly supportive for anti-racial action, he was also kicked out from the Olympic team and kind of didn't follow up, just like these three, his athletic career, but had to do something else. Luckily, he was a successful doctor. He was part of the Doctors Without Borders, and he worked in sport development in many countries where mainstream sport infrastructure still didn't exist. One of them was Saudi Arabia, and while being out as a medical doctor from US, in Saudi Arabia he had to go back in the closet and do his work for the mainstream sport organization, processing how strange this situation, if not pervert, is to go in and out depending on your context. When he returned to LA to live, he joined a local bowling club, which was specifically run for the gay group, by the gay group, and he was kind of inspired to see sports in community. Remember, he was elite athlete. He didn't take part in community events before. He was kind of inspired to do more in this field. It was also the time that was interesting because of the tensions around assassination of Harvey Milk. And in one of these tournaments, he was announced as the athlete of the tournament, whatever. He went up to the stage and said, while receiving an award, it would be so great that here in San Francisco we actually have gay Olympics. And everyone stood up and applauded him, and he basically said, okay, now we have to follow up and spend the rest of the next year going across US, visiting individually gay bars, saunas, cultural centers, wherever he could find gay and lesbian population, and try to persuade them to join him in San Francisco next year. Luckily, because he had good reputation in a city, he formed a group that is called the San Francisco Arts and Athletics Society, and he got support from the mayor. He got support from major organizations in this field, and he organized successfully Gay Cultural Week and Gay Olympic Games in 1982. So to put this in perspective, this is 40 years of the Gay Olympics. So in September, they will be celebrating this anniversary. It's still not an event that is being taught in sport schools. If it's taught, it's taught as a kind of exceptional phenomena. It's not analyzed as kind of innovation in the field of sport and culture. I will show also some images that are interesting. If you see that I've crossed the Gay Olympic Games, the word Olympic is crossed, because he was already in battle with US Olympic Committee over the Mexico Olympics. When they heard that he's doing the Gay Olympics, they were even more upset, so they basically got a court order for him not to use this brand. So although at the time there were other events using the term Olympics in their name, they were not allowed. So 3 weeks before the event, they needed to scrape the word Olympic from every merch they did until that moment. This included medals, T-shirts, banners, everything. And somehow they managed to do it. They had a court hearing, like, I think it was, the last one was literally 10 days before the opening. They lost the case. He lost most of his material property in following years in battling this with the US Olympic Committee, but the games themselves were a success. They had Tina Turner opening the ceremony, the San Francisco official support from the supervisor. Doris Ward was so supportive. They gave them a lot of facilities that they could use. And basically this was a first in many, many quadrennial multi-sport arts and culture events under the Gay Games brand. What was important, he, as someone who was like progressive intellectual with kind of creative spark, he also designed the logo of the Gay Games and did a lot of cultural work. He tried also to deal with some norms that we take for granted these days. So, for example, he didn't want to have nationalism dominate Olympics. So they established a new form of representation that only city teams could take part in the Olympics. You can fake that you are from a city, but you cannot wave national flags. They had for the first time sports that were not Olympics. They had for the first time sports in this kind of multi-sport combination. They had sports that were not heteronormatively organized so that pairs would always be male and female, but they had, you know, 2 women performing together or 2 men. And they included some sports which didn't existed or were not legally sanctioned as disciplines for women or disciplines for men. So, for example, women could both join men teams in sports where they didn't have a team, and also they could form their own teams in a sport where they were previously not able. Men could also do sports like synchronized swimming, which was illegal for men until a few years ago, I think 2 or 3 years ago. So they had like 1,350 participants, which was a huge event. On the next one, they doubled the size, again in San Francisco, and the following one, which was in Vancouver, it doubled again. So by the time they reached the 4th Gay Games, which was in New York, that also overlapped with celebration of 20 years from Stonewall. They had 15,000 participants, which made them bigger than Olympics. So they basically have all volunteer event organized by community, being non-commercial, and being like successful, super complex week-long event. That included also arts and culture and not just sport. Why am I making this really specific statement about arts and culture and being non-profit and being community-owned and based? Because the sport literally had totally opposite direction in terms of Olympics since 80s. Basically, since the Cold War, since the 1980 boycott of Moscow Olympics by many Western countries, and LA Olympics by many Eastern Bloc countries, and Coca-Cola manager taking over organization of 1984 Olympics. Basically, they decided, okay, we are going to do business. This is not going to be just sport event. The escalation of this crisis was temporarily kind of also condensed. I didn't manage to find a free photo of that in Sarajevo Olympics 1984, because it was the only Olympics where both Soviets and US were taking part, and it was the first Olympics that was more or less paid by broadcasting rights. So the Yugoslavia didn't have money to do the facilities, they didn't have money to do infrastructure, but because LA raised so much money in a deal, I think it was with NBC, they managed to get Sarajevo funded to do new facilities altogether. So on one hand, you have extreme industrialization of mainstream sport and Olympics, and this goes totally in the opposite direction. Why also it's also important to reflect on this, how the gay games were scaling up so fast. The third and the fourth gay games were happening at the peak crisis of AIDS crisis in North America. So basically, the gay games were the only positive thing that these communities in kind of trauma and terror, or so many people dying, and mainstream society at the beginning not really paying attention, like Ronald Reagan administration was basically ignoring early days of AIDS. And until I think Rock Hudson died, it was not something that was discussed in mainstream politics as urgency and like, at least for the US. The photo where you see sport diver Greg Langlois, how do you pronounce Louganis? Oh, okay. He was one of the most prominent divers of the times. I think he won medals on 2 Olympics in a row. I'm not sure if both Olympics were double golds, but he was like one of the most probably. He also came out both as gay as HIV positive athlete. So there was like super exceptional times in 1984 New York gay games. How am I doing with time? Borderline, okay. Why is this interesting as a case study? Because these days we are kind of discussing diversity politics around inclusion in a mainstream sport as something that is like a good sign of the times, where we are finally having, I don't know, 1 or 2 gay person coming out every month, and maybe at Olympics or like big championships a bit more. It's still not happening in the most industrialized sport like football, at least not massively, at least not with men. It's interesting to see maybe that there are things that mainstream sport and mainstream kind of cultural practices can potentially be inspired by these histories that were not known or less known and less prominent. In like specific emancipatory lines that you can see within sport, like for example in tennis, since Billie Jean King came out, since Martina Navratilova came out, it became this sport where it's easier to come out, at least for women. In diving, since Greg came out, and I think there was at least 2 or 3 Australian and now British divers who came out, it has become a place where it's easier to come out. So basically, when there is like a historic precedence of kind of courageous acts, there is a kind of a sense of development. But if you look at the other sports, there is no such trend. Queer sport is kind of a non-defined kind of elusive concept that I started using since, as Florian says, 2005, but it was actually originated from gay games in Amsterdam, where there was Dutch sociologist, anthropologist Gert Hekma, who wrote a kind of a plea or kind of manifesto about a need or necessity to think and create and do queer acts inside of the sport field. And it was kind of a special moment for the gay games also, because it was the first gay games that received big institutional support by arts and culture. So you had Stedelijk Museum and like, I think 2 or 3 other big cultural institutions doing big exhibitions, commissioning works that were topical and related to this field. So why am I talking about all of this here? I think it's always interesting where you have opportunity to show artworks inside of the greater kind of context around sport, what kind of artworks you show, and what kind of culture of criticality or not you support, and how that could lead to potential questioning of what we consider are the norms of sport. Yeah, I was looking just before arriving here, not really systematically, at the Munich 2022.com webpage, which is made for this European Championships. And it was interesting that even when they relate to like the most positive commitments they have around, I think they say something about 12 challenges, 12 commitments, 12 projects about sustainability. This part is like the least developed. There was like a reference as 2 focus areas out of 5 were impact on grassroots, and there is no reference to any LGBT, IQ, feminist grassroots sport. Like even literally this weekend there was a big 10th tournament of Team Munich, that it was a gay tournament that was totally not integrated in this greater framework of sports and culture and diversity. And there is also this focus area of inclusion and accessibility. And historically, even Munich had good efforts in doing this. When Munich was organizing the European type of gay games, which is called Euro Games. It's also multi-sport event, also targeting LGBTIQ community primarily. They were the first event of that scale and that size that was focusing not only on LGBTIQs, but also people who are doing sports with disability. So I think it was 2004. It was supposed to be my premiere in the gay sports. I was supposed to play volleyball with a team of very radical Thai volleyball players who have their own, not documentary, it's a feature film called Iron Ladies. They're super fun, playing a lot with femininity and kind of queer aesthetics when they play. I didn't, unfortunately. They were not granted visas. I stayed in Croatia. And it's interesting that even this positive example that Munich had back in 2004, where they did something both for, let's say, queers and people with disability, and even harder work, queer people with disability doing sports, because we tend to see as a norm people with disability as kind of asexual or less sexual individuals. So you don't, or at least that used to be the norm, you don't address this kind of intersection, how they might feel double oppression from being part of these both minorities. And yeah, because this is kind of a start of an art program for this week and start of the season that is going to be busy in Munich. I'm really curious to see if Munich can catch up with its heritage and catch up with what could be done in the next months before the actual European Championship. Yeah, I think that's all.
Thank you so much. We will, we go into depth and talk about it in a moment, but before that, I'm very happy Caitlin Fisher is here, a queer artist, community organizer and trainer. Caitlin was a professional football player in Brazil, Sweden and USA before turning to embodied movements from the pitch as tool for somatic activism focused on gender, LGBTQ, IA plus rights and the commons. She co-founded a gender justice collective in Brazil with her teammates and has spent years as an organizer in the labor union movement of female football players. Now based in Berlin, her work currently involves exploring processes of declaration through movement research and dance in relation to the felt sense and listening with technologies of mutual care and solidarity. She is a trainer of emotional CPR, a peer-led approach to mental health support and recovery, and is working as part of the Social Pleasure Center community project in Berlin, amidst intersectional practices for community connection, peer-to-peer support, and collective emancipation. Thanks so much, and I hand over the microphone to you.
It's been a long time coming, you know? A real long time. Not always coming, but always a real long time. They haven't wanted us inside. In fact, they despise the thought of us inside that sacred space. But now, well, not only acceptance on its way, here, somewhere and other, growing, gaining, giving, embracing, not only, you hear me? Not only, not even, not quite, not only, but calling in, beckoning in, enticing, drawing. Come on, love. Your toes are precious to us, those toiling toes. Tender touches on the leather ball, sweet grace of glory and gentle gesture, that a gal. This dream is both of ours now. Oh, seduction, you seduce so well. We've been doing this work, this labor, this leisure, this recreation, this performance, this play for decades upon decades upon decades upon decades upon decades. Only now you want us in? Well, Happy New Year to you. How long have we been trying to prove to you that we belong? That our rhythm, spontaneity, flair, touch, vision, shots, tactics, sass, fakes, trickery, mastery, magic feet, ankles, gaze, glance, skulls powering through the ball are brilliant. How long have we been trying to convince you that our game is your game? Same lines, same length, same 18-yard box, same surface, same texture, same white chalk paint, same seed, same soil, frame, goal, net, same stands, benches, judges, referees, same whistle, toil, duration, guards, same training, ball, prep, same color cards, same cheer, loyalty, same numbers, same spike, same pursuit, same mistakes, same blame, loudspeaker, stitching, smells. But you haven't listened, and you haven't watched. And so we've gone on performing with no audience. We perform without spectators. We entertain nobody but ourselves. And so we're told our labor in this entertainment industry is in vain. Invisible acts. Have you ever watched? Once? Twice? Well, now you want us. You want us. You want our bodies? I wish I could say too little too late, but I can't, because we're eager and we're grateful. We're yearning and enticed, feeling valuable and valued for the first time. And this is how you do it, huh? Parabéns para você. You're an expert at making us feel valuable. Myself feel worth it. This is your fate. This is your forte, mastered ace of inclusive mechanisms of incorporating in, folding outside in, layering, and seamlessly stacking in. Joining at the hinges with precision, seemingly effortless, so good at it, so subtle, so swift, so sly, so slick, never wavering or second-guessing your ways, your direction, your path or pace, so confident, which makes you so attractive, so undeniable and tempting, so hard to resist or think of alternative possibilities to you when in your grasp or gaze, in the promise even of your seduction or even in the dream and fantasy of your seduction. You've got this number down. And the more you move along and grow, the more your presence and power becomes omnipresent. Other things fall to the wayside, forgotten or never known in the first place. The body knows, but it's easy to forget. Because you embrace a fringe, you abrazar the fringe when you swallow a fringe and you starve alternatives. We know. We know. But we're so grateful, and we're sucked into your seduction. And now you make your seduction an institution, something permanent and material for us to feel valid. You wait for the thank you. Thank you. Oh, this awaited moment. How many generations of ballers. The excitement amidst the crowd is washing out the raised eyebrows. The hairs on our legs get shaved in unison, not a trace left behind. Little doubt or disjuncture or resistance. But it's not the whole picture. There's powerful stuff in the cracks and crevices. Don't underestimate us. Don't underestimate the stuff in the rifts. These bonds sustain us. Our open fields won't get enclosed. Don't forget, we run towards each other after a goal is scored. Now here we are, July 2022. The first football federation in the world to equalize World Cup prize money did so in May. Is this what we've been waiting for? Yes. Yes. Yes, we need fair and equitable treatment and decent conditions for this work. Respect for this labor to earn a living. Elimination of discrimination. Opportunities for growth and development. But what if growing isn't about getting bigger and developing isn't about development? What if we want the growth of the game to nurture something else? What about our teams, our talent, our touch, our collective belonging, cooperation, and customs? Our appreciation, exchanges, connection to local communities and each other? What if we aren't prepared to lose what's being lost? What if it's our ways of coming together that count? What if we need to slow down to notice this? And what if slowing down isn't the same thing as going slowly, but it's urgent? Perhaps we could catch another kind of attention from here, catch our attention. What if we started watching for something else? What if we started wondering together about the game that emerges from here?
Well, thanks a lot also for bringing a physical presence into this, not only into this talk, but also into actually the whole series where we were talking so much about assembling, but actually the physical presence was, well, due to COVID, but also due to mostly lectures missing, but also because of course I was wondering about the relationship between arts and sports and arts, and this was already a very impressive answer to how to relate these two things, which would be maybe something, well, which was not so much in the center of what we wanted to talk tonight, but maybe since we are there at the moment, I would maybe stick for a moment and then coming back to the other topics addressed to you, Caitlin, but also a bit to you. What process? Or can you describe the process of you how to relate your practice as an athlete to an artistic practice? What steps and why is it needed at all? Where does the interest come from, and why do you think that art is a way and choreography and is a way of doing that, or not writing manifestos or doing? I mean, you do political activist work, but what is the role of this specific practice in there? Sorry for right out of the performance jumping into talking about it. I know that's not very nice, but that's the situation now.
Yeah. For me, yeah, it comes from a very personal place of recovery. My career ended with an injury pretty abruptly, which was more than physical. It was kind of psychosomatic as well. And that was 10 years ago when I stopped playing. And it took me some years after. There was, transition time of figuring out after 24 years straight of playing football pretty much every day, of then not only what to do, but also with my body. And it was after several years that I found somatic dance, improvisation, and movement. And for me, this has really been what I experience now is 10 years of recovering from professional football, from really hyper-competitive elite sport spaces, and really tied a lot to what I experienced as a lot of pressure around a very narrow gender script and image of hyper-femininity imposed upon the women's game and female players, and how I experienced that as a very narrowing down version of what was allowed to be expressed. And since leaving the game, it has been about recovering feeling, what I also experienced in narrowing a feeling, and going very fast for a very long time, and feeling quite far ahead of myself and my feelings and my being. And so this kind of deceleration and slowing down in a process of recovery from that space that was tied to many layers of different types of labor, including this performance off the pitch as well as on, around, very narrow gender norms that also tied very closely to experiences of homophobia, and where those intersected was also extremely strong. So this type of movement and art in this way has come in for me as a place of healing and recovery, and also connecting to other teammates and others in the game that have since stopped playing or that are still playing.
I think we maybe come back also to this question also of the emotions, because also Michael, you were talking from the fan side also about how emotion is not possible to express. Maybe we come back to that later, but staying with the art, I mentioned before that actually in this space, just a couple of meters back there, last time I was in here was in 2018 when Joanna Warscha curated Public Art Munich, and Massimo Forlan, a Swiss performance artist, was enacting the whole game of the German, West German, East German famous soccer game where East Germany won, and he performed the role of Sparwasser, the guy who shot the goal alone in a choreography in the space. So there's a link already to some artistic practice in that. You have a different practice yourself also within the field of culture and art. Maybe you could just also say a little bit more how this link and why this link makes sense for you.
Unlike Caitlin, my sport career was like super early finishing, because I went for the art school, and just like disciplining to train yourself twice a day. If you go twice, art school just doesn't match. And the sense of liberation of doing something else outside of the norm was too strong. And I only returned to think of sport as a place for community together, for kind of deal with social anxieties, to process your own ideas of masculinity or conforming to norms, was when I was at the art residency in New York at the Thing, and I went to one because it was 2002. It was time of the gay games in Sydney, so all the web was covered with all of these advertising, at least in LGBT community, there are gay games happening. And I didn't know until then what was that at all, which tells you quite a bit that you can be like in sports, be gay and never hear of gay games if you are not from a kind of privileged context. And I just went to one swimming club, Team New York Aquatics, and after the first practice, everyone went to, and they were like super nice, like, yes, you can join, yeah, it doesn't matter that you are registered or not, and stuff like this. And they just went for breakfast because it was super early in the morning together, and just like chit-chatted for like an hour. And I was like, wow, I trained 3 sports at different levels. I never had this sense of acceptance, of community, of belonging. Of course, it came up in a moment where I was also maybe transforming myself and around other things, but it really made me feel, okay, there is something in this community sport which is totally unrelated to what I was experiencing in competitive sport. And I couldn't go back to Croatia not to think, okay, how can I recreate this context and even start from scratch? And this was, it took a while. It took maybe 2 or 3 years to go from having an idea to get 5 people who understand that this exists and this is possible to do, and then start an actual local community that is still super homophobic. Croatia, we only had like 1 pride that was attacked, and then 2-3 prides that were like 150 people maximum, mostly, looking like police drills and not like entertainment or festivity. I felt this is where I could contribute. This is where my experience of questioning things, organizing, and kind of being persistent can be useful and could kind of create something different. Because I also realized, coming from New York, from Cologne, from Berlin, where I did cultural work, these were the places of privilege. Like, this is where sport was gay. But if you come to Eastern Europe, where you cannot find people socializing in public space, this was totally queer. This was totally political. This was totally, I remember the moment when I was coaching, and it was not the first practice, it was maybe 20th practice, that a couple who was playing volleyball actually kissed each other, and some people for the first time saw in real life, 2 male guys kissing, and they were all gays. So this was for me kind of important. And then, of course, I used the kind of cultural capital I had to do exhibitions, to do presentations, to invite people to talk about this, to engage audience with this, to find artworks that speak to these topics, and was much inspired actually by football activism around homophobia. There was this art activist group, Justin campaign, about the first out gay and black professional football player in UK, that made me think, okay, this actually makes sense to do as an art practice, as a cultural and social practice, and not only as a kind of sport organizing, because sport organizing doesn't have the tools, doesn't have these opportunities, these aspirations, because you had to change the perspective of people who would just see sport as oppressive, as normative, as something you have to commit under certain rules, and not see it as liberating, emancipatory, creative work.
And before leaving the art part, I promise, but I would be interested, even though it's on one hand maybe far-fetched, but on the other side, you're describing an artistic practice within the ultra fan movement of choreographies and singing that doesn't come from the art world, I guess. I mean, maybe there's some influence from somewhere, but I guess it's rather, so where does it come from, and how is it actually practiced? How is it conceived? Who does the choreography? Who invents the lyrics?
First of all, when I'm allowed, I would to refer what both had just said. I was very moved and touched by Caitlin's performance. It remembered me, of course, at my own professional career, semi-professional career, but for quite a long period. I was part of a highly competitive sport in a absolutely heteronormative surrounding, and I realized what we at that time and still are missing. Nobody would have be open to express himself in that group. Everybody was following the expected rules, or like what somebody expected from us. And I think this goes for fan culture as well, for a great part of fan culture as well. It makes so many things not possible because the space is so close or so narrow. to your question, maybe that within the cultural practice of ultras doing a choreography, maybe there's a chance in it. You hardly find a place in fan culture where men are painting all the day, where men are on their knees and handling with colors and with artistic things, and when men are sewing, like nähen, sewing, and designing things, and this is quite interesting. But there's no like scientific research on that, or like somebody talking about or speaking about that. But this is clearly a very interesting area where it might open some opportunities or a window. I'm not sure, but
yeah, I was wondering also about, like, are there connections, like for example in your practice in organizing queer Olympics or games and so on, is there a connection to the well, the ultras are mainstream, but at the same time not mainstream fan culture, but are there connections, or is it a completely separate world for you from your point of view, or how do you work with it?
I think they kind of exist in parallel, and they sometimes cross paths. There are like people who exceptionally retired from mainstream sport and kind of reactivated in community sports, and there are people who maybe came from community sports and their practice was relevant outside. For example, what I was saying earlier about being not just minority niche, but being a supermodel as like a hyper developed different model of doing sport. There are now tournaments in all over Europe, actually most of the weekends, not every, that are organized by LGBT groups, that are run exclusively voluntarily, but they are attended by people who are not part of LGBT community, because they think that value of organizing this, the kind of the expressions of kind of freedom, of kind of liberal atmosphere makes them feel much better than what they experience at the regular kind of mainstream recreational sports. And a lot of straight recreational athletes are joining gay clubs. For example, there was a big kind of discussion a few years ago in Denmark where triathletes and swimmers who are straight massively went into the gay clubs because they were just better organized, more fun, and like, why would they go with like badly organized, not under social kind of sports recreation? I mean, no one is earning huge amounts of money out of it, so they might as well go with the like more queer folks. And in that respect, I think these are still different worlds, but in some contexts they are slowly kind of touching each other and kind of maybe overlapping, but more as exceptions than the rules.
I like that you were stressing the well-organized part, and you were, Michael, were several times also mentioning how well-organized things are, and so there's already something to meet on for the well-organization. But is there, to just for a moment stay with this, Michael, is there when you say that there was a change in terms of anti-racism from the 90s to now within the fan culture and within the ultras, is there a change happening, or is this a topic within the ultra scene, or is it just something that is somewhere else and there's no interest in it? And maybe the same question would go for: is there an interest in women football, for example, or is it a different group of fans, or is it a division within the fans, or?
It's different when you're talking about the ultras and the rest of the fans. Like when it's to give you an impression in numbers, when Eintracht Frankfurt, for instance, played Barcelona, the away game in Barcelona, where 30,000 fans from Frankfurt went to Barcelona, which was crazy and fantastic. There's between 700 and 1,000 ultras, but the rest is they're different from the ultras, and they are organized in other fan clubs. So when you talk about ultras, it's it differs from city to city and from club to club. It's when you look at St. Pauli, when you look at Werder Bremen, the fans, when you look at St. Paul at Babelsberg, fourth tier club in Potsdam, then they run a lot of actions against sexism, against homophobia, and they are really open for these topics. And it's speaking on an overall level in Germany. We in German football, I think we have nearly 30 clubs where we have gay, lesbian fan clubs, and they are visible. They are part of the organized fans, and as we are in close dialogue with them, and from time to time I ask them about their experiences, and they hardly can tell me about negative experiences in their club. I think it's different when you talk about the ultras. It's not that, I would say, not that they are hostile, but because when you need to be an ultra, you have to be very like strong, male, aggressive, and this doesn't give the space for openness to that kind. When you were dancing and having heard you, I was wondering how fantastic it would be if we had a open gay lead singer at some club. It would be really great to have this role model. Maybe it would open some space.
But how did then the change in terms of racism and anti-racism happen that you're describing?
Boom. I think it helped. Football became very international. In the 70s and 80s, only 2 foreign players were allowed in the Bundesliga. And after the Bosman ruling, it has changed massively. A lot of players from Africa came to the Bundesliga, and like when you support your team, you cannot differ between if you have a black player or an Asian player or a Bio-Deutschen player. It's about the team, and this understanding of support singled out the right-wing extremists because they made that difference. They as clear racists, they didn't want to support the black player. And at my club we had this fantastic, like Anthony Yeboah, he a striker from Ghana, a fantastic player. He played at Saarbrücken, the first team in Germany. When he came from Ghana to Germany, he played at Saarbrücken, and Saarbrücken played Eintracht Frankfurt in a decisive game, like a knockout game, promotion or not promotion, and all the Frankfurt fans booed Yeboah with a racist attitude. And the next season he was bought from Eintracht. This made a lot of people think, and we had some activists within the fans who took this opportunity and touched this topic and get into connection with the Ghana community in Frankfurt and started an anti-racist campaign. Until today, it's working until today. And I think this has not only happened in Frankfurt, it's maybe one of the points which has led that the anti-racism is. You hardly find a club where I think it's really a positive development in German football.
And then, Kathleen, because you were talking about also about becoming mainstream in a way, so that this is a goal to become mainstream. I mean, financially, but also in terms of audience.
Das ist schön.
Another participant. So I was wondering. Also, what does it mean? Like why is it? I mean, I understand on the level of acceptance. I understand it. On the financial level, I also understand it. But I was wondering a little bit from the field of art, where you would a lot of pride would be in being not for many being not mainstream art, by being in opposition to mainstream. So but this doesn't work for sport to a degree, because you need this general acceptance, or what does subculture mean in sport? Is that an option, or in which way?
Yeah, these are hard questions, but yeah, I think a big part of my experience in playing, I played for most of my career in Brazil with Santos, and when I arrived, we weren't allowed to play on the men's pitches in the stadium. We didn't have media coverage. We had the men's old uniforms from 8 years prior. Just blatant gender discrimination in our faces. And being so grateful for a, piece of crumb from the cake and saying thank you. It's such internalized inferiority around our game and our playing that even just to wear the logo and get the shirt. And so, yeah, doing a lot of work with teammates, and we did a lot of organizing off the field, starting a collective around gender justice and going into communities and talking with coaches and parents and asking, why don't you want your daughter to play? And going, using gender to talk about issues of homophobia without going there, and feminism without saying it, and these different levels, and talking about equality, talking about getting, equal rights, and also recognizing that, we didn't know how to talk about our rights or labor in relation to what we were doing. The question of somebody coming in and saying that you don't deserve as much because you don't have as many fans, you don't generate as much revenue, that when that came towards us and when that came towards me, we didn't have answers. It was like, period, right there, you're right. Our game is slower, not as strong, not kicking a 60-yard ball like that, pinging it across the field. And so the way that then gets internalized is like, this is the golden standard, this is the value, we're going for that then it silences it. And it's like, okay, maybe we don't deserve minimum wage and a professional contract. So we had professional obligations and responsibility as players, but without professional treatment and without professional status, so without the protections and the benefits of thinking of labor, but not knowing how to talk about it in terms of labor. And so this question then of, as working through this together as players on and off the field, and these questions coming up of, what does it mean to be professional on the field? What does it mean to professionalize the women's game, which we've been seeing moving from stages of amateurism and semi-professional in many different places. I've, played on teams that are semi-professional. You have some contracted players, some off, huge blurry gray areas of what that means. And the type of offshoots that come from that, of different types of alternatives and self-organizing, where the feeling of the game belongs to us as players still, that we're, doing this. So all of those pieces and components, and then asking, it's been, the majority of the 20th century that many countries prohibited women from playing football. And then thinking of going from there of like institutionally being excluded to then kind of socio-culturally the stigma excluding us, of saying you shouldn't play this and this isn't feminine, and in order to be included should fit this script, to then economic exclusion of being like, well, you can play and do this, but you're not going to earn a living wage, so you need another job, which means you're going to be tired on your feet by the time you come play, which means you probably won't get as many fans, and And so then, this question now with the growth of the women's game and being accepted and salaries going up, media coming in, sponsorship deals coming in, revenue being generated, what does it mean to professionalize? Do we necessarily need to commercialize as we professionalize? What does that mean? And is there a way to ensure that we have equitable treatment, fair conditions, decent, proper standards, and minimum standards of labor when we think of work to ensure that it's protected and that we have that as a base? Is there a way to ensure that with this type of growth, or what direction, and what type of resources can come in if they're not coming from there?
Maybe I can add something to this. I think it's super interesting for us in the art and cultural field to consider intervention as like a method of like relating to these normative fields like sport is, and both prototype of what could be like different imaginaries for things to come together in different ways, like to not literally as like assemblies of different types of sport, but also not literally just thinking what is there that needs to be disrupted and not taken for granted. I think the biggest problem with sport, and I experienced this, I think many people who critically think sport experienced this at the start of pandemic. We basically had lockdowns and all sports events being closed, like not happening. But because in media you would have slots for sports, you would have these paradoxically bizarre, even sarcastic situations where like the news broadcaster would have 5-10 minutes to fill with sports and nothing was happening. So you would see like €1 million or whatever football player complaining how he is like not practicing, not doing games. He's like borderline depressed, playing with PlayStation, and there are people dying, and we kind of have to sympathize with that kind of situation. And it was really infuriating. I think it lasted almost for a month, that all the mainstream news kept reporting how sport is not happening. Okay, we got it. Like we either give that airtime to someone else, or you start doing something else. You don't continue in this like prefixed fashion to address sport as something you have to do in very particular way, with very particular kind of industrial approach to address needs of stars, to address those who are most privileged. And of course it's collapsing, but it's perfect time to think degrowth, to like stop talking about how things are not amazing for sport, how things need to change, but actually change them. Last week there was a big conference called Play the Game. It's one of the oldest conferences that actually critically addresses sport. And one of the scientists from the sport field, I think he came from Canada, he said, like, we have to start imagining sport degrowing so much that it splits in half. Like literally that next year we have half of the players, half of the clubs, half of the events, everything. That needs to be starting point. Not thinking how we can bridge this situation until it's a little bit better and we go back to the norm of what was before pandemic.
Is there a question from you, a comment? Since you're patiently sitting there all the time. If not, I would just pick...
ask something to the audience, because I was asking, talking about gay sports so much. How many of you heard of gay clubs and gay games? Okay. To the fellows online, no one.
But to come then to an end with many questions open, of course, I will just pick up on what you already started with, Jaco, to ask, and you all mentioned it, of course, this extreme paradoxical situation of a hyper-capitalized system, which is one of the biggest businesses and so on, and trying to work within it, against it, which anyway you could say about the art field, at least the visual art field partly as well, which is, but sport is of course much bigger as a business and also in terms of people it involves. Does it make sense to do that, or is it like not only splitting in half in terms of the numbers that is needed in terms of degrowth, but is maybe splitting in terms of the scenes of saying, okay, we leave this behind, and I know this is a fantastical description, but we leave this behind. We have to actually found a new scene because changing this scene, this system is close to impossible.
I think this was a big problem on the left, like at least on a kind of center left. They basically gave up on foras like football games, and it was all, at least from what I understand, from coming from Balkans, it was basically place where you raise right-wing nationalist masses. Especially in kind of a high level, high industrialized sport like football, where you have like all the leftist cultural intellectual scene giving up. Like we just cannot deal with what is happening in sport, and that this is not our field. For me, this is super frustrating situation. I mean, how can you turn like the blind eye to such a huge part of society that takes so much of the resources? I mean, in Germany, when there is like a major league game, like all the public transport for that hour or few hours around the match is more or less like jammed with like so many police officers around. I mean, people have to think what sport does to us and not like it's somewhere else, and there's something there is no way to interfere with. I think for the art field specifically, we need to not reduce ourselves to be decorations to the beautiful sport events. One of the last things CC Sport did before pandemic, in 2018, we made this charter where we asked cultural institutions to commit to cultural and social responsibility in relations to sport, because we find that this happens relatively often, that cultural institutions joined these kind of events, these programs, where sport is taken for granted, where it's not discussed critically, and we perpetuate whatever is there in the systems. We only got, I think, 4 or 5 cultural institutions to sign it, but it was like a first attempt to see how we can actually formulate what needs to change and what could be our shared position.
Of course, it would be good to kill this monster, like professional football. Every time gaining more revenue and losing all the values which are important. But when you ask me if it's worth working in that field, the fan projects I'm working for, they are independent from the sports. We are these are institutions, community-based institutions, financed by public money and money from the football organizations. But we are working independently, and asking if it's worth working there, then I would say yes. When you just mentioned the situation on the Balkans, who's about the nationalistic fans over there, the homophobe fans over there, and then realizing that all the years of work has changed in Germany so much, in my opinion, and not only changed within fans, but changed within the football organizations like the clubs and the management like DFL and even with the DFB. They are celebrating the Pride Month. When they have a wagon on the CSD, this was due to President Zwanziger. He was the one who opened the FA to that topic. This is the one thing what I would say, and looking at fans organizing themselves, being critical to authorities, being critical towards developments, not only within the sport but within society as well. And then I would say it's worth working there. I'm not sure if you know that they are tired of these of this as well. Like there was a year-long discussion at HSV, Hamburger SV, the former number one club in Hamburg, where fans were struggling to get a say in the club, fans were fighting that the club still is a 100% member-run club, but there were forces on the business side who wanted to sell 49% of the club, and this was like an ideological debate and struggle. And after the fans lost, they had a fantastic campaign, but at the end they lost, and nearly the half of the club was sold. They moved out of the club and formed a club themselves, a community-based club, Falke, and I think now more than 1,500 members over there, and connected with similar clubs over Europe. I think that's a good development, and I like it.
Yeah. It's complicated. I think this thing around competition comes in a lot too, of like thinking, if we were to break with this model or that do it differently, like that somehow this, notion that it like wouldn't be competitive or that it becomes recreational, like does that suggest that we just like go back to being amateurs? Or like, even being able to imagine what that would be if it's not competitive. And for somebody who played competitive sport for so long and loved it, I'm like, yes, competition still should be part of it. If you told me that we were playing and not counting the score, like, forget it. But this question around, where competition fits in with that, and then I think this other aspect of like where to look, and that in some ways, I think it's easy to like glorify like looking back of being like, oh, when it was this way, or like we were amateurs or semi-pro and we had local sponsorship from the restaurant down the street that we ate at after the game, and they knew us, and the girls came up and got our autographs and knew us and we knew them, and thinking of this web of social fabric and connections of where we were, together and why we were here, why we're doing this, why are we, I think these questions around why are we playing, why are we watching, what brings us to the game, what brings us to the stadium, what brings us to training each day, all of these questions, and just thinking about where to look. And this is something I've been really relating to a lot in terms of this kind of deceleration and also embodied muscle memory and embodiment of this, of how turning to the body and also thinking a lot with like former players and this space of, what lives in the body? Where can the body speak from if we let things emerge from there? And also if we reconnect after leaving the game, as like that transition after leaving the game where like you're entirely disparate now, like spread apart, like the feeling of team entirely gone, of like where can we find each other again? And where can we like allow the body to speak in that space as a place of leading us somewhere else?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Željko, Caitlin, Michael. Thank you. Thanks, Raumlabor, for the invitation and for sitting and listening with us. And I think also the storm in the background is a good sign that we finish now. Thanks a lot. And thanks.